Greetings, lovers of history and the written word. Today's episode is about a series of events that occurred in Georgia more than 100 years ago that resulted in the death of two people, Mary Phagan first, and then the later lynching of Leo Frank for her rape and murder. So there are a lot of names involved, and that's why that I suggest people begin with a more mass-produced, more for the public rendition of the story, because when you get to the number one book, I think it's the best one available. It's certainly the best one that I have read. There's a lot there. It's a big fatty, the number one book, and it goes over everybody involved in some detail. Now, there are some people that have come up in the book that I just recently finished, which is An Unspeakable Crime, that I was less than aware of before. There were several teenage witnesses, and the impression that's given in this book is that there were a lot of people who wanted to get in on the celebrity even then. So that not only is their testimony suspect, but their actual involvement at all is suspect. What they actually saw or didn't see is quite suspect. But it is important that the Mary Phagan family, her family, is largely not covered. There's not a lot there because the family remained largely silent. And also, later on, one of her uncles was at least cognizant of and at least complicit with the lynching of Leo Frank. So there's also, the Frank family. Lucille Frank maintained the innocence of her husband for decades. She stayed in Georgia and always said that he was completely innocent of any wrongdoing. And ultimately, in I think it was 1986, he was issued a pardon and was completely exonerated, obviously too late and to no real effect. But I wonder about that too, because there was a lot of politicking behind it, and the character who came into play then, in my opinion, his testimony is highly suspect as well. But let's just go ahead and go with a couple of honorable mentions. Murder at the Pencil Factory, the killing of Mary Frank 100 years later. It's only 61 pages long. It was published in 2013. I have yet to find a free copy of that, so I haven't read it. Then there's The Silent and the Damned, also a better reviewed book that I have yet to find. But those are some books that are out there on the topic. Of the four that I have read, I just wanted to mention the one that I just finished, An Unspeakable Crime by Elaine Mary Alphen. Not a great book. It does cover all of the important elements. I think it might be a good book to start with because there are a lot of names and there are a lot of pictures to go with those names. So there's a lot that you can digest before you get into a more meaty, weighty one. Unfortunately, The Murder of Little Mary Phagan, I think, is the most pro-Phagan, anti-Leo Frank book out there. It was written by a great niece, I think it was, or a great-great niece, also named Mary Phagan. There's no new information in that book. It is, very pro-family, and it's, again, one of these books that winds up not being so much about the events themselves, but about the feelings that that person had and how it affected their lives, many decades later. So not a great book. I don't know that it offers anything really, but there it is. The Leo Frank case is number 2 on my list, and it's 280 pages long. It does spell out all of the reasons that Leo Frank was at least not guilty of the murder. Now, even that book, I felt like, didn't make a very strong case that he wasn't involved in some way. It made a great case, for his character. It denounced a lot of the witnesses that claimed that he was involved in just unsavory activity. But there was nothing there to really say that he was completely without guilt, especially with the rape of Mary Frank. The number one book out there, and it's pretty pro-Frank, but again, it never, in my opinion, completely exonerates him of guilt, and that is And the Dead Shall Rise by Steve Oney, who has a relative who later wrote a book about the murder of Fred Hampton. So the other suspects that are introduced in all of these books are Newt Lee, who apparently was an African-American drifter of sorts, and he escaped without any repercussions at all, to my knowledge, and Jim Connolly, who did do a year on a chain gang for the misuse of a corpse, but he also wound up going away and later on marrying. He was in trouble with the law multiple times, and then I think he lived well on into the future and ultimately sort of disappeared, leaving only Leo Frank, who was already had his sentence commuted, which enraged a lot of people. And then the lynch mob came and got him and hung him. By all accounts, every book that I have read, he handled himself with extreme dignity through his trial, through everything that happened, including at the very end writing a note either in Yiddish or German to his wife Lucille. But anyway, those are my top 4. If anybody is aware of a good book about this issue, please let me know. I really enjoy that kind of stuff. Please do like and subscribe and click on our links.